Next year is going to be a very important year, not only for teams like the Lakers and Nets trying to have championship aspirations, but also for some players that were put in positions to where the expectations are higher than it's ever been. And in today's video, we're going to talk about 5 of those players and why I believe they have the most to prove next season. But before we get started with this video, make sure you drop a like, comment your opinions, and subscribe to the channel. Trying to hit 100,000 subscribers by the end of the year, which is a really tall task to climb, but I upload videos every other day, so hopefully with you guys' support I can get there. But without further ado, let's kick things off with our first player. Kemba Walker last year had a really rough season because he came back from injury, and then the expectation is, oh, when he comes back he's gonna add to the Celtics, or he's just gonna be the trash that he was in the bubble. And obviously he struggled in the beginning. I remember that game against the Lakers where he was just really terrible, and then he missed that open step back game winner. It was a whole bunch of shit that was happening in Boston, and considering he was taking shots away from Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown, and a guy like Kemba is best utilized with the ball in his hands, not great defensively, it was just not a great fit from the very beginning, and I called that out from as soon as they signed Kemba Walker. But then Brad Stevens decided to make the move of trading Kemba Walker as soon as he got in the front office and replaced Danny Ainge. And look, Kemba Walker, I'm not going to blame him for all the issues in Boston, but depending on what happens in Boston this upcoming season, Kemba's going to be looked at a little bit suspect, especially if he doesn't perform well in New York. Of all places, the New York Knicks fans are one of the most brutally honest fans, and they will turn on you on a dime if you break their hearts. And for a team like New York, that's a perfect place for Kemba Walker. We know he has the history of hitting the shot in the Mecca while he was in college, and we also know that the Knicks have needed a point guard for what seems like forever. I mean, Derrick Rose was good last year, but he is not going to be your long-term solution at that position, especially considering his injury history and age. And let's not forget that the Oklahoma City Thunder, they bought him out. They didn't even want him on that team. They didn't want to pull no Chris Paul type of situation where they play him, increase his value, and then trade him for more assets. No. They just bought him out because they did not want him on that roster. And it's crazy to think about because just 3 years ago, Kemba Walker was an all-star, all-NBA caliber player. And because of that, he was in line to potentially even get a supermax contract. But now just a couple of years later, he's not even viewed as a top 10 point guard, and he was bought out by one of the worst teams in the NBA last season. So if you're Kemba Walker, not only do you have expectations from Knicks fans in the front office there, but you also need to prove to yourself and the league that you are still that guy, because if not, you're just going to be another player whose career went to die in New York. So throughout the entire year, one of the biggest stories for the Atlanta Hawks was what they were going to do with John Collins come free agency, because by all reports, John Collins wanted over $100 million, and considering he was going to be a restricted free agent, many people didn't know if they were just going to let him walk for nothing or if they were going to match the offer, do a sign and trade. It was really just up in the air what the Atlanta Hawks were going to do as it pertained to paying John Collins in free agency, because Collins was a good player, and though he showed potential of being an all-star caliber player, he had just not gotten there yet. And in the postseason, he had his moments, but offensively speaking, he was very reliant on Trae Young. As you can even go back to that series against the Milwaukee Bucks without Trae Young on the court, John Collins really did not play that well, because for a guy like John Collins to go out there and have some measly numbers due to the fact that your shot creation is lacking, I gotta say that is a bit questionable for a player that wants over $100 million. But obviously he got his money, and look, Collins is still a good player. Even if he doesn't live up to this contract, he's a great roll man, he's explosive out of the pick and roll, great lob threat, he can even space the floor, he's a great fit with Trae Young, and even defensively, he is severely improved. But with the Hawks coming off of an Eastern Conference Finals appearance, even if they don't get back there next year, which is understandable considering how stacked the top of the Eastern Conference is, they're expected to at least be a threat and a competitive team in that conference. And for that to happen, Collins needs to become a better player than what he is currently, because settling to be a lob catching big who can spot up occasionally is not good enough. You want it to be treated like a star player? Well, I need you to become a star player, because you are not that right now. And for a team that's relatively young with good young players, I might add, I would say Collins is in a perfect situation for him to thrive. You have a playmaker in Trae Young, you have defenders around you in Clint Capella, DeAndre Hunter, so it really just falls on if Collins is going to develop into that star player that we all know he can be. Because next year the Atlanta Hawks are not going to be the hunters anymore, they're going to be the hunted, and in order for them to withstand all of that, John Collins needs to develop into the player that we all know he has the potential to become. Kyle Kuzma has to be in the top 5 most overly criticized players in the NBA. And I understand the reasons why, but my goodness, people just act like he is not a good player after every single thing that he does wrong. And like I said, I'm not saying I don't understand the criticism. I get it. He takes bad shots sometimes. He probably thinks a little bit too highly of himself than he should. And also, the Lakers promised that he was going to be that third star alongside LeBron James and Anthony Davis, and it clearly did not pan out that way. But look, you have to understand that Kyle Kuzma, he is who he is. You can't look at him and put expectations that are just not realistic. And if you actually look at Kuz's career, he's improved in areas that people just don't acknowledge. He's a good shooter, especially in spot-up situations, which leads to him being a good off-ball player. He can space the floor, and he's a good cutter. As we've seen, his best season was when he had a playmaker in Lonzo Ball, who was able to find him in those situations, not only in the half court, but even in transition. And as far as defense goes, I understand his defense is not the greatest in the world, but it is not a liability at all. He has improved from being the liability he was earlier on in his career, around his rookie and sophomore seasons, to being relatively capable at this point, and I think that has become one of the more underrated aspects of his game. He can move his feet fairly well on the perimeter, he can switch, he can rotate, he can play off ball, he can do weak side, he can really do it all for you if you want him to do so. The only issue with Kuzma, in my opinion, is his offense, because I will admit last year offensively, he did not take the step forward that I thought he was going to take, especially with Anthony Davis going down, and even when LeBron James went down. Offensively, the Lakers were not a good team, and I understand that it's not just Kuz a part of that, but he was a part of that, and I thought he was going to be a big reason why they would be able to sustain without LeBron and Anthony Davis, but he ended up being a reason why they weren't. And then as far as the playoffs go, we all know how that went. He didn't really play that well whatsoever, and the less said about that, the better, right? But then you move on to what he's doing in Washington now, and I think that that's going to be a really good move for Kyle Kuzma's career, because it gives him a new change in scenery, less expectations, less eyeballs on him, and honestly, it's just a fresh start that is much needed in his career. We've seen guys like Brandon Ingram, Lonzo Ball, Josh Hart, whenever they were away from the spotlight of LA and all those expectations having to play alongside LeBron James, they thrived. And I think on a team like the Washington Wizards that's just trying to make the playoffs, or should I say play in a weaker Eastern Conference, I think that is a perfect situation for Kyle Kuzma, especially considering the pieces around him fit perfectly. And I believe that next year he has a lot to prove, because people have just really given up on him. They've made him into a meme, and if he improves in the way that I think he will, expect him to be in the running for the most improved player of the year. I remember when Michael Porter Jr. was in high school, his Ball is Life tape dropped, and everybody was like, man, this guy is going to be the next KD. 6'9" with a handle, can shoot. I mean, what's not to like, right? But fast forward a couple of years later, and Michael Porter Jr. is really on the brink of being a borderline all-star, I would say. This is a guy that at the end of last season, in the absence of Jamal Murray, was able to average just short of 24 points a game and 6 rebounds, along with shooting 56% from the field, 49% from 3, and 85% at the free throw line. Offensively speaking, he may not be the best shot creator in the world, which we're going to get to in a second, but off ball, he's one of the best off-ball players in the league. A great cutter, a great spot-up shooter, and he mixes perfectly with a guy like Nikola Jokic, who can always find the open man due to him being one of the best playmakers in NBA history. But unfortunately, come postseason time, the negatives in MPJ's game came back to bite the Denver Nuggets in the ass, because as I previously mentioned earlier, he is a great off-ball player and one of the best off-ball players in the league, I would say. But on the ball, he's not a great shot creator, and combine that with the fact that on the defensive offensive side of the ball, he isn't really that great whatsoever, and you have a guy that's really holding himself back from reaching his full potential. But next season, with him being on his contract year, it's going to be very important for Michael Porter Jr. to be able to ball out to the best of his ability next season, not only for his sake, but for the Nuggets' sake as a franchise. And I think with Jamal Murray being out for a good portion of the season because of the ACL tear that he suffered last year, I think that's a good and prime opportunity for MPJ to showcase his abilities and why the Denver Nuggets should have faith in him to be that third guy alongside Jamal Murray and Nikola Jokic. I have been a fan of Bam Adebayo going back to his days as a Kentucky Wildcat. As for all of you guys that watch my channel know, I am a big Kentucky fan, you know what I'm saying? So I gotta root for Bam, and combine that with the fact that he's a Nigerian, and I gotta love him even more. But honestly, as I've watched Bam Adebayo last year, especially in the playoffs, I found myself consistently asking if Bam Adebayo was overrated or not. Because this is a guy that I've heard people go as far as to say that he's a top 3 big in the league, top 15 player in the NBA, and honestly, I think those conversations can kind of be overblown just simply due to his defensive impact. And trust me, I understand how great of a defensive player he is. He's going to be a defensive player of the year one day and a perennial candidate for the rest of his prime. I completely understand all of those arguments. But unfortunately, the Miami Heat did not pay him to just be some lob-catching defensive juggernaut. He has to be more than that, because when you watch that postseason last year against the Milwaukee Bucks, they were literally sacking off of Bam Adebayo and daring him to beat them on the offensive side of the ball, especially with the mid-range jumper. And the mid-range jumper was something that I was told that Bam Adebayo has in his bag. Well then, why did he shoot below 40% from the mid-range when they were giving him the mid-range jumper throughout that entire series by just hanging in the paint? I understand Adebayo is a great lob threat. I understand he's also a great passer as well for his position, but those things should not be the only thing that defines you as a player, especially if you have a max contract. The Miami Heat are in a situation where right now, the development of Bam Adebayo and Tyler Hero, which is a subject for another discussion, but Bam Adebayo primarily is what the potential championship hopes of the Miami Heat depend on. Because you can be the greatest defensive player in the world, but if you're being paid all that money, I need to see more productivity on the offensive side of the ball, especially if the team is structured around your development on that side of the ball to elevate them to championship level. So as far as I'm concerned, next year, Bam Adebayo, I need to see improvement in your offensive game, because the Miami Heat need that in order to launch themselves into real championship contention. But those are just my opinions. If you disagree, let me know down below in the comment section. And if you enjoyed this video, drop a like and subscribe to the channel. Press the bell for post notifications and follow me on social media. The links are down below in the description box. This is your boy Young Mustard signing out. Y'all have a blessed day. Peace.